episode 12 to episode 8. Well, it's just, man, it's one of the few things that gets me fired up more than seeing people, you know, friends, people I care about succeed, and it's beautiful, man. So I love it. I'm so happy for you. And this is just step one. This is phase one. Oh, yes. Phase one.
I very much appreciate that. It's very, very kind to do. I've been a huge fan of your stuff for a long time, so I guess maybe a lot of the audience might not be familiar. I give a little bit of a background. I found the best guided meditation that I've ever done was your release to now, your original one with binaural beats, and then we came on and we spoke about binaural beats. And I'm always interested in the trajectory of people that have got a background in meditation and then try and apply it. You know, not the asceticism, live in a cave somewhere, just aim for eternal peace, but actually, okay, how do we use the insights of mindfulness and having a little bit of a space between stimulus and response? What goes into that space? What do we do tactically? What are the strategies that we can use with this little bit more open perspective that we view the world to make us a bit more effective? And I think one of the questions that comes up a lot of the time when I look at your work is, why do you think that so many people feel like they're drifting through life? Like life happens to them rather than the other way around?
Yeah, I mean, that's, first off, you pointed out like one of the most important things in all of the meditation journey, which a lot of people never talk about. You know, is being aware of that space between stimulus and response, and then knowing what to do and why you're doing something in that moment, and what the changes are. I mean, that's really the name of the game. You know, speaking of to your question in terms of, you know, what will sort of end up in, you know, the situations in life, is that, you know, when we're growing up, we're becoming adults, we're trying to figure out who we are, like what we like, how to live, how to be a human in the world. And ultimately what we're doing is we're just caught in this moment of distraction, of reaction. We're just reacting to everything in life. We're reacting to our parents. Then we go insert ourselves into a social situation. We start reacting to everything in school. We react to our teachers. And when we become young adults, we start reacting to society. Right? So we're not ever really clear in the moment about what's going on. We're just simply kind of reacting to what's happening around us. And as that happens, that the world around us is reacting to, because we are not self-aware, we're not making intentional choices in the present moment. Rather, we're in this kind of autopilot fight or flight mode where we're just reacting. The world kind of forms around us, and all of those behavioral patterns, all those behavioral habits start to take this shape, and then we start relying on those patterns because they are working for us in the sense that they're just keeping us alive, they're keeping us going, right? But what happens is that those patterns form so gradually that we mistake those ways of thinking and those ways of being for what's quote-unquote normal and for who we are. And ultimately what happens is we mistake that for what's possible. And so that's where people get really stuck not being able to make the change in their life that they want. It's because they mistake what has happened to happen in their life, the chance of everything that they've experienced, and then the autopilot reactions that they've made of those over the entire course of their experience in life, with everything that is, of what is, of how things can be. And it's not until you increase that self-awareness and begin to see yourself from the outside in and the inside out that you begin to realize that, hold on a second, I actually have a say in that. Like, life isn't happening to me, I can happen to life. And it's that switch perspective that allows you to start making these intentional choices in the present moment, a lot of which are breaking the reactive behaviors that have developed over a long period of time. And that's really where meditation can be incredibly useful. And that space that you were talking about at the beginning comes into play.
Yeah, what do you mean when you talk about more being possible? How do we change our definition of what is possible, given that our knowledge is largely informed by the experiences that we've had in life? How do we step outside of ourselves? What does it even mean to do that?
Yeah, well, it means that you have to ultimately change the negative, limiting thinking habits that you're in. Because you spend your whole life thinking a certain way, you have a certain mindset, and ultimately you're identifying yourself with a certain language, with a certain story. And that story is what holds you back. Because, most of the things that we look at in life, that we want to achieve, they are very possible. Like, the reason we want to do them a lot of times is because we see a lot of other people doing them. Like, people could see you and like, here's a successful podcaster, how did you do that? Well, you're doing an amazing job, but there are a lot of successful podcasters out there. You know what I mean? So it means that it's available, it's out there. So what is preventing an individual who wants to do that from being able to go and do that? And that would be their mindset and the way that they think about themselves, right? So ultimately how that plays out, and if you break that out into real life, a person would, let's use you as an example, they say, I want to do what Chris is doing. I have the burning passion, I have the feeling. And then they feel the feeling arising that's pushing them forward, that makes them want to make an action. And then what happens is that they go right up to the precipice of going to make that action, and now they're on the edge of change. They're on the edge of where something is becoming possible. And this is what we're getting into your question, really. It's like, so now what happens at that precipice? They have a negative thought that arises, and it's generally like, what are you doing? Like, you can't do this. This is too complicated. Like, not you, someone else. This isn't you. You can't do this. Or they'll come up with the negative thoughts will go, well, it's the market's too populated now. Whatever bullshit that it is to come up with. And then the person goes, oh, well, there's my quote-unquote proof that I can't do that, and so I'll stop working and I won't try. Now, what's really interesting about that is that I spend a lot of time thinking about what that moment is. Like, what's actually happening there? And I wanted to drill down into that on a animalistic level, biological and like evolutionary psychology. Let's look at feeling. So in myself, even though I'm very good at bypassing that, and I've worked with that a lot just over my entire life and creating projects, because when you're making creative projects, the first thing, the second you go to release something, what's something out in the world, that goes up times 10. So I started like really sitting with that. Like, what's going on here? What is this process? Let's break this down so I can explain it to myself and to other people, and we can really figure out what's going on and hijack that, move that out of the way so we can actually take the action and do what we want to do in life. So I started thinking about it, and as I sat with that feeling anytime it arose in me, I realized that it is the same type of animal fear that you feel in like a fight or flight response. So if you go and you stand next to a river, you feel this feeling coming off this raging river. It's like a magnet pushing against you, and it actually feels the scariness, there's something kind of bigger than you coming off of it. And generally people will take a few steps back without even thinking about it, right? They'll realize after the fact that, oh, I backed up from the edge of that river, it felt dangerous. Same thing if you're looking up the edge of a building. You get this feeling that you can't explain. There's like this magnetic force pushing against you. You take a few steps back because you're like, oh, scary. So ultimately what that is that is your amygdala, that's your animal brain sending signals to you going, hey, this isn't safe, you're going to be vulnerable, back up, right? Because it wants your body to survive. Now, if you get into a raging river, you're going to be very vulnerable. If you fall off the edge of a river, you're very vulnerable. There's no more vulnerable state than falling off of the edge of the river. So if we look at that, we can see that that's basically our body trying to protect us from being vulnerable and dying. Now, if we look at that over to a creative space, or space of personal growth, whenever we go to move into the unknown, within the map of ourselves, the way we think about ourselves, the way that we think about what's possible in our world, we go to move into the unknown. That same thing triggers. But the vulnerability is not the vulnerability of the physical world, it's the vulnerability of the ego and of our emotional world. So basically, if we were to go, and this gets into the complicated, if we were to move into this space where we're like, you know what, I'm going to try. I'm going to get the account and start doing the podcast. I'm going to reach out to people. What happens is we become vulnerable to the world. And our body wants to protect us from that. Because if we feel vulnerable, then we start to not feel capable. And we feel like we might be injured or become inoperative and stuff like that. A really interesting element to it too is that our ego becomes vulnerable. Not even to other people, but how we think about ourselves. Because we have this off